Cancer 7, two fairies on a moonlit night. We live in the physical world, of course, in terms of our physical body, and our physicality generally is what gets most of our attention. But that's not the only realm we live in. We have other worlds that are relevant to us. They may not be identified by scientists as worlds, but they're identified by mystics as such. And what we're studying with this particular degree is the next plane from the earth plane. Is called the astral. And it's not some spooky, ghost-like kind of thing of the imagination that doesn't really exist at all. It definitely exists. It's just that you can't measure it. You can't put it in boxes. You can't please the scientists with this. And yet all of us know that it exists, because we go there when we go to sleep. When we dream, we enter a different realm of being, and the mind's attention is drifting in this world that doesn't obey the worlds of the physical universe that we think we live in. Gravity doesn't apply there. We can fly, and time doesn't apply there because we can go around in ever-repeating cycles, and all strange things happen in dreams. And this is how we know of the astral, really. And it applies to a much wider sense of our lives than just dreams. Whenever we go into a mode of daydreaming, we imagine what might happen. We enter the astral plane with the mind. And the astral world is the plane of mind. We can think of it as the mind. And the best way to understand it nowadays is to see the internet. The internet is the best metaphor that can exist, I would say, for the astral plane. But it isn't the internet. The astral plane is much more free and colorful. It is worth determining that there are considered to be two definite aspects of the astral, the lower astral and the upper astral. And the lower astral is where we think negative thoughts, and the upper astral is when we're creative and optimistic. And they have very, very different energies. You really don't want to visit the lower astral. Some people play with this as though this were high-level magic. It isn't. It's magic, but it's low-level magic, very, very dark, potentially, in the lower astral. Now, to bring this back to a more pragmatic, everyday interpretation, when we daydream, we create a relationship, shall we call it, between the physical body that brings about the mechanics of the capacity we have to dream, and the mental body, which expresses itself much more freely when there's an absolutely responsive and blank canvas to play with. So we get to see a part of us which normally could not be seen. That which is normally unconscious can be projected in our daydreams onto the astral plane. And so we can perceive the possibilities of life in a much freer, fuller, more colorful way. And if we do this repeatedly, we get to have a dream and develop a dream. And there's something about this process which makes fantasy become belief. If we fantasize something often enough, we'll begin to believe in it. And whatever we believe, eventually we get to know. And whatever we know, we get to experience. And it creates life. The process is complex, and it takes a certain time, and it takes a certain commitment and a certain emotional intensity. Whatever you have clear in mind and full on in your passion, this is what charges up the astral plane. This is what makes astral reality full on and likelier, therefore, to become manifest in the physical world. Now, another way to use this facility we have of daydreaming is to escape the stresses and strains of everyday life is just too much to cope sometimes. Life is really intense indeed, and we need to allow the soul some freedom. The soul's nature is not physical. The soul finds all this physicality quite a burden. And occasionally, I think all of us feel somewhat imprisoned here on earth. And some feel imprisoned within the body. That we really don't want to be here. We don't want to live in this physical constraint because we have a memory or an imagination of the soul's freedom to soar and fly and just do whatever it chooses spontaneously in the moment forever. If somebody can remember that, then they're not going to want to be in the body all the time. And it's necessary sometimes to escape, and to escape into the world of fantasy in the imagination. If this is done not too frequently, not all the time, not using drugs and drink too often, if it's done in a moderate kind of way, it's very healthy indeed. It's just like the idea of rest and recuperation is exactly the same thing. As much as the body needs to sleep at night to recuperate, so particularly does the mind and the soul. And this is what we do when we sleep. We relax the soul. Now these flights of fantasy that we have can be channeled. We can learn to convert idle fantasy, stupid daydreaming, excuse me, into the stuff of which creative inspiration is born. And that has its own quality. That is something that we really know that we have when we have it. Yes, that's a great idea. We know we can make it work. To make a creative idea work requires a few abilities. First of all, perhaps clarity. What is it we're trying to make real? Second, motivation. Do we have the passion? Do we have the will? The certainty that we want this to occur? To step into the physical world with this dream? If we do, then we need to garner some support from friends and get on with the task in hand, collecting resources and so on, earthy stuff. But the beginning of all that is this creative imagination. And this cannot be accessed unless we know how to, some extent anyway, to work with the astral plane, work with the mind, train the mind to do what the will wants it to. The mind normally behaves in a way similar to a leaf blowing around in the wind. Now this, now that, and is not focused. Those of us that learn to focus the mind, we can have an incisive attitude in life, and we're much more likely to make things happen. However, people that do that very often get lost in this sharp point of focused attention, and they forget to go to the other end of the equation, which is not sharp at all. It's the exact opposite. It's diffuse. So this process of just opening up to the imagination and allowing the muse, the source of inspiration, to just become. It doesn't really present itself as a seed yet. We're the ones that turn this amorphous sense of creative energy, we're the ones that turn it into something specific that could be made manifest. So, Cancer 7, two fairies on a moonlit night. The moonlit night indicates bringing some light into the darkness. In other words, the unconscious processes that we have can be given the light of intelligence. And the two fairies, they're magical beings that do not obey the constraints of the physical world. This is available to us all.
especially if you have a planet there. And lucky me, I have Uranus there, so I really get this one. This degree speaks to me very clearly.